Wind Lightning Mountain Range. Xiao Yang continued to dragging poison out of the demon poison spot and used the glazed lotus heart flame to refine it throughout the night. Only when the sky gradually became bright did he, who was still in a rock house, slowly open his eyes. An entire night's refinement did not cause Xiao Yang to feel the least bit tired. Instead, due to the replenishment of the enormous amount of Do Qi, his condition was perfectly at his peak. A faint glow was flickering while he blinked. This was due to the great surge of Do Qi in his body that was difficult to hide. Xiao Yang lowered his head and looked at the demon poison spot on his chest. At the moment, its size had clearly shrunk a little. Xiao Yang shook his head with some dissatisfaction when he saw this. He had at least removed 10 bundles of poison during the night. It was unexpected that this amount was such a small portion when compared to the demon poison spot as a whole. After having absorbed all the Do Qi within the 10 clusters of poison, Xiao Yang could vaguely feel that his strength had improved. Although this feeling was not very obvious, it was considered quite incredible. After all, each star within the Do Zone class required an extremely great amount of energy. If Xiao Yang were to train in an orthodox fashion, it was likely that he would require nearly 3 to 4 months in order to reach this stage even with his speed, yet he was able to reach it in one night. This effectiveness was already quite great. There was a massive gap between every star within the Do Zone class. Hence, the classification within the expert Do Zones were a little more detailed in the central planes. Every star was divided into 4 levels. They were entry, intermediate, advance, and peak. However, such differentiation was too subtle. Hence, very few people would measure another in such a manner. However, it was quite useful when using it to measure one's own strength. According to Xiao Yang's guess, he should be currently at the intermediate level after having absorbed the Do Qi within the demon poison spot. It is indeed very difficult to raise one's level in the Do Zone class. No wonder First Elder's level did not experience a great increase despite having trained for so many years. Xiao Yang sighed softly in his heart. He took out his clothes and put them back on. Currently, the Do Qi in his body had reached saturation and needed a period of time of adaptation before he could once again absorb Do Qi from the demon poison spot. Fortunately, with his current strength, the demon poison spot no longer posed a fatal threat to him. Instead, this thing was treated as a movable Do Qi warehouse by Xiao Yang. Looks like it is time to leave. The 4-pavilion grand meeting is about to be held in a few days. Xiao Yang leaped down from the bed. He mused for a moment before packing his things properly. After which, he did not stay any longer. He pushed open the door and simply walked out. When Xiao Yang walked out of the room, the gold-swallowing mice guard standing by the side hurriedly bowed to Xiao Yang. He waved his hand and without saying anything, stepped onto the empty air, and appeared to be walking on the stairs leading to heaven as ascended into the sky in front of the envious eyes of those few guards. Xiao Yang overlooked the Heaven Eye Mountain as he stood in the sky. He involuntarily smiled and walked forward. This was something that he had dreamed of. It was unexpected that he was able to fulfill it now. 2 figures hurried over when Xiao Yang rose into the air. "Little brother Xiao Yang, are you going to leave now?" Jinsha appeared. He looked at Xiao Yang and hurriedly asked. Xiao Yang nodded and laughed. "I still have some matters to attend to and cannot remain here for long. Thank you both for your great hospitality. If I have time in the future, I will come and visit." Jinsha and Jin Jiyu could not say any other words to get Xiao Yang to stay after they heard this. They immediately replied in deep voices, "Little brother Xiao Yang, the gold-swallowing mouse tribe owes you a big favor. If you meet any trouble in the future, please do not forget about us old fellows." Xiao Yang titled his head. The gold-swallowing mouse faction a large population and remained up to date with the news in the Central Plains region. It was naturally a good thing to befriend them. "Cuckoo, looking at your anxious face, the 2 of us shall not hold you back any longer. We will pray for your journey to be smooth. Jin Jiyu smiled, cupped his hands, and spoke. In that case, I shall borrow Elder Jingu's blessing. Goodbye. Xiao Yang smiled. He cupped his hands to the two of them and did not stay any longer. His body moved and transformed into a light figure, which rushed out of the Heaven Eye mountain range with a swoosh sound. Within a couple of blinks, he had already disappeared from Jin Shi's and Jingu's sight. With Xiao Yang's speed, he had already exited the region of the Heaven Eye mountain range within 10+ minutes. Originally, with his current strength, his speed would have been a little faster if he used the bone wings. However, the words of the Grey Wolf King were firmly etched in his heart. Although he had currently advanced to the Do Zone class, this strength was really insignificant when compared to the Heaven Demon Phoenix tribe. Hence, unless it was a critical moment, it was best that he used the bone wings as little as possible in the future. Xiao Yang's figure stopped on a mountain peak outside of the Heaven Eye mountain range. He took a map of the northern region from his space ring. The map he had purchased in Bone Transforming City back then. After which, he began to search for something on it. According to what Mu Qingluan had mentioned, the 4-pavilion grand meeting this time around would be held at the headquarters of the Wind Lightning Pavilion, which was the Eastern Pavilion. Based on the map, the position of the Eastern Pavilion should be near the border between the northern and middle region of the Central Plains. It is so far away. Looks like I will need about 5 days just to travel there, Xiao Yang bitterly laughed after putting the map back into his storage ring. It was fortunate that had reached the level of a Do Zone. Otherwise, it was likely that he would not have been able to hurry to the Eastern Pavilion without 10 days to half a month's time. At that time, it was likely that the gathering would have ended. Looks like I should travel quickly. Otherwise, it will be unlucky if I miss it. Xiao Yang sighed as he faced the eastern sky. A bright silver glow slowly surfaced on his feet. Immediately, muffled thunder sounded. His body disappeared in a ghost-like manner. The name of the Wind Lightning Eastern Pavilion held a heavy weight throughout the Central Plains region. Being the headquarters of the Wind Lightning Pavilion, this place was filled with many experts. Its defenses were also extremely solid. During the years since the Wind Lightning Pavilion had been founded, it had experienced quite a number of tribulations. However, the Eastern Pavilion had always remained standing. Its reputation had gradually formed from many fights between factions. Only after all that did it gain its current status. The 4-pavilion grand meeting, as the name suggested, was naturally conducted by the 4 pavilions in the Central Plains. Although the main characters were the 4 pavilions, each season of the 4-pavilion grand meeting would be a grand event within the Central Plains region. Although it could not be put in the same category as the Pill Gathering of the Pill Tower, it was also a rare event. This 4-pavilion grand meeting was not a competition between the experts of the older generations. Instead, it was a competition for the younger generation. Of course, the younger generation, who could represent the 4 pavilions, were naturally the most outstanding people among the younger generation of each party. New blood was the most important thing if each faction wanted to survive. Hence, the 4 pavilions paid great attention to the younger generation. Under their great focus on grooming the younger generation, it was natural that quite a number of outstanding individuals had appeared among them: the Wind Lightning Pavilion's Feng Qing'er, the 10,000 Sword Pavilion's Tang Ying, the Yellow Spring Pavilion's Wang Chen, the Falling Star Pavilion's Mu Qingluan, etc. All of these people possess some reputation across the entire Central Plains region. Of course, the Central Plains was one where many outstanding individuals were hidden. No one knew just where Dark Horse would suddenly appear. Even though this was the case, each of the 4-pavilion grand meeting would attract a countless number of strong young people from many factions. The main characters of this grand meeting were usually the 4 pavilions, but it did not reject some other competitors. However, in order to increase the quality, it naturally possessed a necessary filter. Moreover, it was rumored to be extremely harsh. This had eliminated some of the people who were there simply to inflate the numbers. After all, among the competitions between the younger generation, the 4-pavilion grand meeting was considered to be of a superior quality. Even some of the experts from the older generation had difficulty achieving the requirements. The location where the 4-pavilion grand meeting would be held was usually decided by the party who had won the last season's competition. The victor of the last grand meeting was the Wind Lightning Pavilion, hence, the location this time was decided to be the Wind Lightning Eastern Pavilion. The Wind Lightning Eastern Pavilion was situated in the Wind Lightning mountain range near the border of the northern region. This place was extremely unique. Perhaps it was because the terrain was too high, but there was always a rumbling thunder sound. The weather was also unpredictable. At first it may be extremely sunny, but the next moment, a thunderstorm may appear. The entire Wind Lightning mountain range was the territory controlled by the Eastern Pavilion. This place was just like their backyard. Other factions who were not strong did not dare to encroach into this area. The Wind Lightning mountain range during this period of time was unusually lively. A countless number of people came from all over the place and gathered at the Lightning Mountain within the mountain range. This was because above the Lightning Mountain stood the headquarters of the Wind Lightning Pavilion, the Eastern Pavilion. A ray of light bounded across the sky outside of the Wind Lightning mountain range like a falling star. It transformed into a person that landed on the top of a mountain. He lowered his head and looked at the ant-like human flow below only to be stunned. The person who had hurried over was naturally Xiao Yang, who had increased his speed along the way. He had basically gone all out during these few days, and had seldom rested along the way. Even by hurrying in this manner, he had exhausted 4 days in order to reach this place. This area has a very dense wind lightning strength. Xiao Yang gently exhaled. He looked into the distance and saw the mountain range, which was many times larger than the Heaven Eye mountain range. There was a shocking rumbling thunder within this mountain range he could feel despite being a great distance away. The wind lightning strength contained within the mountain range caused his expression to alter. This place should be the Wind Lightning mountain range where the Wind Lightning Pavilion Eastern Pavilion is located. Looks like I'm not late. Xiao Yang found a deserted spot on the mountain peak and landed on the ground. After which, he headed to the foot of the mountain. He helplessly shook his head when he saw the densely packed human flow outside of the Wind Lightning mountain range. It was likely that these people were all here because of the 4-pavilion grand meeting. I wonder if the 4-pavilion grand meeting has begun? Xiao Yang muttered softly to himself. He briefly thought about before he suddenly took out a thin transparent skin-like item from his storage ring. After which, he covered it over his face. Almost instantly, some changes occurred on the contours of his face. If one did not look carefully, it would likely be difficult for one to recognize him. This item, that could slightly alter one's appearance, was a little thing the little fairy doctor had given him when they headed to the Chuyun Empire back then. It was unexpected that it would still be of use after so many years had passed. He was hiding his appearance in order to save himself some trouble. Currently, everyone was aware of his enmity with the Wind Lightning Pavilion. If he were to openly appear in this place, it was likely that the Wind Lightning Pavilion would not simply stand idly by the side. There were many experts within the Eastern Pavilion. Moreover, the Wind Lightning Pavilion's chief resided here. Even though Xiao Yang had broken through to the Dozone class, he could only choose to avoid a head-on confrontation when meeting with an expert of this level. The reason he had come to the Wind Lightning mountain range was to search for Feng Zunja. Unless he had no choice, he did not wish to expose himself. After all, he would place himself in a dangerous position if that occurred. Therefore, hiding his appearance was indeed necessary. Xiao Yang rubbed his face after having altered his appearance. After which, he walked out of the dense forest, joined the human flow on the main road that led into the mountain range, and moved toward the Wind Lightning mountain range. The various noises within the noisy human flow, which Xiao Yang had joined, caused his ears to feel a ringing sensation. However, Xiao Yang could only laugh as he forcefully endured it. Damn it, there are too many people. Can the Eastern Pavilion accommodate so many people? The grand meeting is about to begin today. Naturally, there will be a lot of people. It is rumored that the people from the 4 pavilions have already arrived. The final victor in the last competition was the Wind Lightning Pavilion. I wonder just who will be the victor this time around? It is difficult to say. Feng Qing'er, Tang Ying, Wang Chen, and that Mu Qingluan are no ordinary people. It is rumored that these four entered the Heaven Eye Mountain Range Heaven Mountain Blood Pool some time ago. Their strength will definitely have improved. I wonder if any one of them borrowed the strength of the blood pool to break through the Do Huang class. These four people have the strength at the peak of the Do Huang class. Adding their tactics, they are even able to exchange blows with some expert Do Zongs. Whoever is able to break through during this period of time will definitely win. Who knows? There are an unknown number of talented individuals in the Central Plains. There are always some dark horses appearing in each of the 4 pavilion grand meetings. I wonder just who will appear this time around? Dark Horse Her. Naturally, it is that young man called Xiao Yang, who has stirred an uproar within the northern region recently. Even the Wind Lightning Northern Pavilion's chief returned empty-handed after personally chasing him. One can just imagine how terrifyingly strong he is. Chi. Xiao Yang might be strong, but this place in the headquarters of the Wind Lightning Pavilion. Do you think that he dares to come here? Xiao Yang was involuntarily startled when he heard the conversation around him eventually talking about him. His hands could not help but rub his face. It was unexpected that he possessed such a reputation in this northern region. However, this was not what he wanted. If his name were to spread to the ears of the Hall of Souls, it was likely that things would become even more troublesome. Xiao Yang successfully entered through the entrance of the mountain range amid a terrible noise. There were disciples from the Wind Lightning Pavilion maintaining order around the entrance. Other than some special guests, ordinary people were not allowed to fly in the air above the Wind Lightning mountain range. This had resulted in Xiao Yang, who did not wish to expose his identity, being forced to walk in. Upon entering the mountain range, Xiao Yang swiftly separated himself from most of the human flow. After which, he turned to a deserted forest, increased his speed, and swiftly rushed to the interior of the mountain range. From the information that he had heard earlier, today should be the start of the 4 pavilion grand meeting. Moreover, the thing that excited Xiao Yang most was that the people from the 4 pavilions had arrived, which meant Feng Zunja should have arrived. If I really meet Feng Zunja, it is best to observe him quietly before making contact with him. Although teacher has said that I can trust him completely, it is always best to be careful. Xiao Yang's figure transformed into a blurry one that shuffled through the mountain range while this thought lingered in his heart. The heavy burden of rescuing Yao Lao and his father were things that Xiao Yang needed to complete. Hence, he needed to ensure his safety. It was best to be cautious about any uncertain factors. The Wind Lightning mountain range was extremely vast. Even with Xiao Yang's speed, he still spent nearly half an hour before reaching the middle of the mountain range. There was a magnificent and steep mountain located at that spot, Lightning Mountain. Lightning Mountain was extremely tall. One was unable to see its peak when looking up from its base. The middle portion of the mountain was covered in a dense fog. This fog was a little dark, and it faintly contained lightning flashing within it. Looking from a distance, this mountain peak seemed to be covered by a countless number of bolts of lightning, making it appear extremely majestic. Xiao Yang let out a praise for the towering Lightning Mountain before moving his body to land somewhere near its base. The top of the Lightning Mountain was the Wind Lightning Pavilion. The defenses of that place were unusually tight. Perhaps it was due to the grand meeting approaching, but the surrounding defenses had also been fortified. There would occasionally be human figures flapping Do Chi wings in the sky. The Lightning Mountain had entered into a tight inspection network. In order to not alert the experts in the Wind Lightning Pavilion, Xiao Yang would naturally not adopt such a brutal break-in method. The line at the foot of the mountain might be long, but Xiao Yang still possessed a little bit of patience. Xiao Yang advanced along with the group and finally came to a stop when he was about to ascend the mountain. At this moment, there were 2 rock roads that led up the mountain. One was provided for those people who had come to watch the grand meeting, while the other was provided for some of the young experts who had come to participate in the grand meeting. There were nearly 100 armored disciples from the Wind Lightning Pavilion guarding the front of the 2 rock roads. Their stern expressions brought about some pressure. This resulted in no one daring to cause trouble. Additionally, there were 2 old men in front of these 100 disciples. One was a male while the other was a female. Xiao Yang's eyes solidified when his gaze swept over these 2 people because the 2 of them were the 2 who had accompanied Feng Qing to the Heaven Eye mountain range back then. The strength of these 2 is quite impressive. I wonder if I will be able to pass through their inspection after having altered my appearance. Xiao Yang slightly frowned. It is unexpected that the participants of this competition are filtered by the Huamu elders of the Eastern Pavilion this time around. These 2 people hold quite a high position within the Wind Lightning Pavilion. The Wind Lightning Pavilion selections have always been harsh. After seeing this today, they do live up to their reputation. Fortunately, I am only here to watch the fun and need to pass through their verification. A group of people in front of Xiao Yang softly conversed while he was frowning. Xiao Yang's heart leaped when he heard this. It seemed that not everyone must be examined by these 2 people. I think that everyone is aware of the rules of my Wind Lightning Pavilion. Anyone who wishes to participate in the grand meeting must first reach the strength of a 3-star Do Huang or higher. Secondly, he or she must be less than 30 years old. Third, this person must last over 5 exchanges in the hands of the old me. Only by meeting these 3 conditions will one possess the qualification to participate. Of course, if you are only here to watch the fun, you can just climb the mountain using the left stone road. A red-clothed elder Hui explained while everyone was engaged in private conversations. Quite a big commotion was stirred when these words sounded. Just fulfilling one of these 3 criteria was not an easy matter, much less all 3 of them. It was really strict. Most of the people chose the road on the left side under such strict criteria. Xiao Yang hesitated for a moment before following the human flow to the left rock road. His aim was merely to find Feng Zunjia. He was not interested in fighting within the Wind Lightning Pavilion. Some trouble would be unavoidable if he ended up recognized by others. While most people were climbing the rock road on the left side, there were also a couple of young people who felt that they were quite strong, intending to attempt the right path. However, all of them were swept aside by Elder Hui without exception. These people might have barely met the requirement of a 3-star Do Huang, but it was clear that they were those that relied on medicinal pills or some natural treasure to support them. Their fighting strengths were similar to that of a 2-star Do Huang. The Huamu elders did not even raise their eyes when fighting these weak fellows. Xiao Yang by the side also laughed in his heart when he saw this. After which, he increased his speed and stepped onto the rock road on the left. Wait! Xiao Yang's feet had just stepped on the rock road when Elder Hui by the side suddenly turned his head before Xiao Yang could even climb up. Elder Hui frowned as he looked at Xiao Yang. The fist under Xiao Yang's sleeves was tightened when he heard this cry. He turned his head slowly and looked at Elder Hui. Elder Hui's eyes slowly swept over Xiao Yang's face before faintly saying, "You seem to have reached the qualification to participate in the competition. Why don't you give it a try?" Numerous gazes shot to Xiao Yang when these words sounded. There were many people earlier who had not passed the test, yet this fellow, who appeared ordinary, possessed such ability. I am not interested in the grand meeting. The reason I have come here is to search for someone. Xiao Yang's voice appeared a little hoarse under his suppression. After saying these words, he ignored Elder Hui, turned around, and climbed to the top of the mountain, leaving behind a group of stunned gazes in the process. "This fellow is too arrogant, no?" The old woman beside Elder Hua knit her brows, glanced at Xiao Yang's back, and asked, "Is there something wrong with that person?" "I don't know. I only sensed the natural fire affinity energy suddenly fluctuate a little when he stepped onto the stone road. For some unknown reason, this person gives me a kind of inexplicable feeling." Elder Hua knit his brows and bitterly laughed. He sighed, "It is most likely just an illusion." The rock road was extremely long. At a glance, it was just like a large meandering snake that followed the mountain range to the top before disappearing in the distant dark clouds. One would feel exceptionally small while walking it. Xiao Yang's footsteps proceeded at a steady pace as he slowly walked to the top of the mountain. Both sides of the mountain road were covered with large silver-colored tree. Such a tree was quite strange. This kind of tree did not have any leaves. Its entire being was just like a straight pillar. The thing that caused Xiao Yang to be surprised was that the interior of this enormous silver-colored tree contained a dense lightning energy. If one used one's spiritual strength to sense it, one would be able to discover a wave of lightning aura at the top of the enormous tree that repeatedly surged out. Finally, it rose into the dark clouds in the sky. Xiao Yang halted his feet as he looked at this scene, falling deep into thought as he did so. The reason the lightning mountain possessed such a frightening wind lightning strength was probably related to these unusual trees. With the silver trees providing a lightning strength, the dark clouds in the sky would never scatter. Thus, one would be able to achieve double the effect with half the effort when practicing a lightning affinity chi method in this place. This wind lightning pavilion really knows how to choose a place. Xiao Yang praised them in his heart. His feet had just moved when the clear cry of a crane suddenly resounded. Everyone immediately looked up to see a beautiful and colorful crane flapping its wings as it flew from the bottom of the mountain all the way to the peak. 7-colored large crane? Could it be that Miss Foam from the Wind Lightning Pavilion is the one on it? The mountain road immediately emitted numerous exclamations and envious noises when they saw the 7-colored large crane. Xiao Yang's gaze also paused on that 7-colored large crane. He did not take another look at the colorful crane. Instead, his gaze locked onto the graceful figure on the back of the enormous crane. Looking at that familiar back, this lady was indeed Feng Qing. The enormous crane did not pause because of the numerous exclamations from the mountain road. With a flap of its enormous wings, it charged into the clouds and quickly disappeared. Xiao Yang slowly withdrew his eyes after the enormous crane disappeared. His brows were involuntarily knit together. There was definitely something on that lady hiding her aura. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Xiao Yang to not be able to see through her strength with his current ability. Looks like this woman is not simple. I have seen the people from the 4 pavilions. If I really want to compare them, this Feng Qing is the most dangerous. Xiao Yang revealed an expression of being deep in thought as he muttered to himself in his heart. Those that he did not know were the most frightening things. Tang Ying, Wang Chen, and Mu Qingluan might be strong since they possessed their own trump cards that could fight with an expert dozong. However, the 3 of them did not give Xiao Yang such a dangerous feeling. Only this Feng Qing caused him to be unable to see through her. If I have guessed correctly, it is likely that the final victor in this 4-pavilion grand meeting will be this woman. Xiao Yang softly sighed. Although there was no basis for this thinking of his, he vaguely had a feeling that caused him to think in this manner. Perhaps it was due to the Wind Lightning Pavilion, but Xiao Yang did not have a good impression of Feng Qing. Although the other party had an outstanding appearance and demeanor, Xiao Yang had a grudge with her right from the start. Hence, his heart felt a little displeased if he were to see her obtain victory in the grand meeting. Xiao Yang curled his mouth and muttered in his heart. After which, he ceased remaining still on this mountain road any longer. He increased his pace. In the end, he transformed into a black line that swiftly rushed to the top of the mountain. Although the lightning mountain was quite tall, Xiao Yang successfully reached the top of the mountain within less than 10 minutes. Xiao Yang had just ascended to the peak when a demon-like noise poured into his ears, causing him to feel a little giddy due to him not being to prepare. When he recovered, his eyes swept around with some lingering fear. He was immediately stunned. All he could see was an unending human sea. Even with Xiao Yang's character, he could not help but feel somewhat speechless at this moment. He did not expect this 4-pavilion grand meeting to actually attract such a crazy flow of human traffic. Xiao Yang was stunned for a moment before he sighed in resignation. His body moved and he rushed to an enormous silver-colored tree. At this moment, quite a number of people were also standing in those strange silver trees around. Therefore, Xiao Yang did not attract many eyes. With the help of a good view, Xiao Yang was able to roughly see the peak of the lightning mountain. The place they were currently at was a stadium. This stadium's building material was clearly the enormous silver-colored tree that Xiao Yang was currently standing on. Its entirety was bright silver in color and quite glaring. There were some potholes in the stadium. It seemed that this was the place where the disciples of the Wind Lightning Pavilion usually trained. The most eye-catching part of the entire peak of the Lightning Mountain was an enormous silver-colored tower. This tower was at least 300 to 400 feet in height, appearing extremely majestic. A lightning glow flickered around the tower while the peak of it was inserted into the cloud layer, giving it an extremely mysterious feeling. There were many buildings on the top of the mountain, likely the quarters of the Wind Lightning Pavilion's disciples. Xiao Yang merely swept his gaze around these places before pausing it on the front of the enormous silver-colored stadium. There were some silver wooden chairs placed at a spot with an extremely good view. Quite a number of stern-looking Wind Lightning Pavilion disciples were standing in front of those seats. Looking at the aura that faintly seeped out of them, it was clear that they were not ordinary disciples. At this moment, these seats were all empty. Clearly, those who had the qualification to sit in them were the heavyweights in the 4 pavilions. Xiao Yang sat cross-legged in the silver tree when he saw that the grand meeting had not formally begun. After which, he shut his eyes and recuperated. The time Xiao Yang recuperated did not last for long when a clear gong sound suddenly appeared on the lightning mountain. Immediately, numerous agile figures flashed from the mountain top. After which, they spread apart. The positions in which these scattered individuals occupied was excellent. They coincidentally surrounded the entire mountain top. Any unusual movement would be locked onto by the sharp eyes of these guards. The disciples of the Wind Lightning Pavilion are indeed well trained. Xiao Yang's eyes opened when the gong sound appeared. He randomly glanced at the positions the human figures occupied as he quietly spoke in his heart. Bang! An enormous thunderbolt suddenly rushed down from the cloud layer while Xiao Yang was muttering to himself. The instantaneous bright light caused most people to reflexively shut their eyes. Xiao Yang narrowed his eyes, studying the enormous thunderbolt. A couple of people were slowly walking out of that spot. Finally, they sat on the silver wooden seats. Xiao Yang's eyes swept over them and his gaze immediately paused on a familiar figure. A coldness flashed across his eyes. Fei Tian. It's actually the Wind Lightning Pavilions for Pavilion Chiefs. TSK, the Wind Lightning Pavilion is indeed filled with experts. The person in the middle should be the rumored Lei Zunjie, right? Some exclamations resounded over the place when everyone opened their eyes and saw the 4 people at the seats. Xiao Yang's heart jumped when he heard this. His gaze turned and instantly paused on a person at the middle. This person had a large build and looked as though he was only 40 or 50 years old. However, his chin was covered in a silver-colored beard. He was wearing a silver-colored robe with lightning pictures sewn on it. Looking from a distance, those pictures seemed to be alive as they continuously flowed. A slight lightning aura even vaguely seeped out of it. This person's aura seemed to be far inferior to Fei Tian and the 2 others. He even had the feeling of an ordinary person. However, by relying on his exceptional spiritual perception, Xiao Yang clearly sensed a dangerous feeling from this person. Such a feeling was something that even Fei Qian did not give off. Is he the chief of the Wind Lightning Pavilion, the one called Lei Zunjie? He is indeed extremely frightening. Xiao Yang exhaled. This was the first time his actual body had faced a real Dozun for the first time. Although the purple-clothed, old man whom he had met at the Hall of Souls was also a Dozun, Xiao Yang was merely a wisp of spiritual strength at that time. Swoosh! An ear-piercing wind sound suddenly resounded over Lightning Mountain when Xiao Yang was feeling amazed in his heart. Immediately, everyone was stunned to see an enormous sword that was over 100 feet in size cutting through the distant space, rushing over. Within a flash, it appeared in the sky above the stadium. Ha ha, Jian Zunjie, you are the fastest to arrive this time around. A silver-robed Lei Zunjie stood up when he saw the enormous sword in the sky. After which, his laughter sounded over the Lightning Mountain like rolling thunder. The enormous sword shook gently and transformed into countless light spots as it collapsed. Two figures slowly descended from the sky above, landing at their seats. The two figures consisted of an old and young man. Xiao Yang was familiar with the young person. He was Tang Ying from the 10,000 Sword Pavilion. The old man beside him was small in size. He was wearing linen clothes and seemed like an inconspicuous, small, old man. However, everyone present knew that this small, old man was a frightening existence who was on the same level as Lei Zunjie. It is unexpected that even Jian Zunjie has arrived. Looks like those who have arrived at the Wind Lightning Mountain range earlier are merely the advance party of the 4 pavilions. Those who are arriving now are the core individuals. Jian Zunjie's appearance instantly caused the stadium's atmosphere to become fiery hot. Jian Zunjie did not really bother with Lei Zunjie's laughter. He rolled his eyes and sat down in a chair. Tang Ying behind him respectfully stood with his hands lowered. Old Jian still has such temper. It looks like the match back then is still a blotch in your heart. A strange laugh, that carried a sinister feeling, sounded when Jian Zunjie had just sat down. Immediately, a dark black glow rushed over from the foot of the mountain. It appeared to have teleported as materialized in their seats. With a wave of his sleeves, the figure unceremoniously sat down. The human figure who had appeared was an old man in black robes. His facial complexion was pale and a somewhat shady look was present between his brows. One of his eyes was black while the other was white, giving him an extremely strange appearance. A familiar figure was behind him. This person was naturally Wang Chen from the Yellow Spring Pavilion. Back then, the old me was unlucky and narrowly lost to him. It is at least much better than some people who have merely lasted for 100 exchanges in Feng Zunjie's hands before being defeated by him. Don't you agree, Huang Quan Zunjie? Jian Zunjie glanced at the black-robed old man as he spoke in a neutral voice. The eyes of the black-robed old man immediately turned chilly when he heard these words. Before he could retort, however, there was a slight change in his expression. His sinister eyes locked firmly on the sky. There was a dragon roar like wind suddenly transmitted over from that spot. This fellow clearly has the fastest speed, yet he always likes to be the last to arrive. Jian Zunjie raised his eyes. His turbid gaze looked at the distant sky as he laughed. Jian Zunjie's voice had just sounded when the dragon roar like wind was transmitted over with a bang. Immediately, an enormous green whirlwind appeared above the mountain in front of a countless number of eyes. Xiao Yang's eyes suddenly shifted when this green-colored whirlwind appeared. He stared firmly at it and the fists in his sleeves abruptly tightened. Feng Zunjie? Chapter 1019, Title: The Commencement of the Grand Meeting. Collapse. The enormous green-colored whirlwind appeared to be twinkling as it materialized in the sky above the enormous stadium within a couple of breaths. The whirlwind gently shook and suddenly paused. After which, it transformed into a countless number of light spots, which scattered. Two figures rode a breeze as they slowly landed next to their seats. It is actually Feng Zunja? Unexpectedly, for Zunja, Dozan have arrived at this grand meeting. This trip has indeed been worthwhile. Usually, it is difficult to see even an elite Dozan, yet four of them have appeared together at this moment. The four-pavilion grand meeting is extremely grand. No wonder it attracts so many people. I wonder just who will be the final victor of the grand meeting this time around? The two people, who were the last to appear, naturally attracted the gazes of the entire stadium, more so for Xiao Yang. The two figures had just appeared when his gaze instantly turned to them. Xiao Yang had already met the green-clothed Mu Qingluan. Hence, his eyes did not pause for long on her before they suddenly paused on the old man in front of her. The old man was wearing a green robe. His long hair spread over his shoulders, giving him a sort of free and easy appearance. That face of his could not be considered ordinary. Even though he was already very old, one could still vaguely see a handsomeness. It was likely that his appearance was definitely breathtaking when he was young. Looking at his outer appearance, he was clearly superior among the four Dozans present. Perhaps it was because he practiced wind affinity chi method, but his demeanor appeared ethereal, giving others an unfathomable feeling. Is he Feng Zunja? Xiao Yang's eyes slowly sized up the green-clothed, old man. An excitement also flashed across his eyes. He had heard about this Feng Zunja quite a number of times from Yao Lao. This person could be considered a friend of Yao Lao that had undergone life and death situations with him. If these words were true and he valued the relationship as greatly as what Yao Lao had described, Xiao Yang should be able to achieve a truly great helper this time around. An excitement rose within Xiao Yang's heart. Lei Zunja and Jian Zunja on the seats smiled and cupped their hands together when they saw Feng Zunja arrived. Feng Zunja had become famous much earlier than any of the three others. Hence, these two people still cupped their hands politely despite all of them currently sharing the same status. However, Huangquan Zunja by the side seemed to have a conflict with Feng Zunja. After narrowing his eyes and glancing at him, he turned his head and looked as though he had not seen him. The green-robed Feng Zunja's face wore a warm smile. He reciprocated the courtesy of Lei Zunja and Jian Zunja. However, he did not give Huangquan Zunja by the side another look. Although the four pavilions were afraid of each other, Feng Zunja was at odds with this Huangquan Zunja. Moreover, the other party's shadiness and ruthless character were things that Feng Zunja disliked. After the couple of them politely greeted each other, Lei Zunja raised his head and looked at the sky. After which, he slowly stood up and swept his gaze over the stadium. Immediately, the noisiness that shot toward the clouds became completely silent under those eyes that contained a faint lightning glow. Today is the auspicious day that my Wind Lightning Pavilion will hold the four-pavilion grand meeting. Thank you all for coming to the Lightning Mountain to support my Wind Lightning Pavilion. However, I think that everyone is aware of the rules of my Wind Lightning Pavilion. I hope that there will not be anyone interrupting the grand meeting when it is being held. Lei Zunja's faint voice was just like a thunder as it resounded over the entire Lightning Mountain. Moreover, his voice contained a hint of lightning might. Some of the weaker individuals involuntarily trembled. Lei Zunja's words were filled with a domineering tone. It was just like an unyielding thunderbolt that did not allow anyone to refute it. Some people might not like to hear such words, but no one present dared to oppose him with his frightening strength. The frightening deterrence of an elite Dozan was really extraordinary. Lei Zunja only nodded slightly when he saw that no unusual noises had appeared. His hand was waved and a clear gong once again sounded in an unhurried manner. The number of participants of this season's Four Pavilion Grand Meeting is 53, including the 4 disciples of the 4 pavilions. The old rules will still apply. It will begin with a chaotic battle until there are only 8 people remaining. All the competitors please enter now. Lei Zunja's voice once again sounded when the gong appeared. Waves of rushing wind resounded over the stadium when Lei Zunja's voice finished speaking. Immediately, numerous young figures flashed into the arena. Finally, they landed one after another and were spread around the arena. All of them were alert. The appearance of these people immediately caused the grand meeting to turn into one with a fiery hot atmosphere. Deafening cheers surged around the mountain in an overwhelming manner. They charged to the sky. The distant dark clouds had also begun to ripple as a result. Mu Qingluan, Tang Ying, and Wang Chen in the VIP seats exchanged glances when the participants entered the arena. After which, their bodies moved and they gently landed in the arena. The moment these three people entered, their surroundings emitted a flapping sound as they became empty. Everyone present knew the strength of these three. Naturally, no one would automatically deliver themselves to them. Being one of the main characters of this grand meeting, the entrance of Mu Qingluan and the two others caused the cheers in the stadium to surge even more. The atmosphere on the mountain top had swiftly entered an extremely excited one following their entrances. Screech! A clear crane cry suddenly sounded in the sky the moment the three people entered the arena. Immediately, an enormous, colorful crane came gliding over from one side of the mountain top. A beautiful figure pressed her toes on the enormous crane's back. The moving figure rushed down and landed in the arena without emitting the slightest noise. Xiao Yang's eyes glanced over. The figure was naturally Feng Qie. Her noble demeanor was something that no one could compare with. The atmosphere outside of the arena immediately soared when Feng Qing entered. Everyone knew that the chances of this lady winning this season's for Pavilion Grand Meeting were the highest among all the participants. The moment Feng Qing appeared, surprise flashed across the eyes of Feng Zunja, Qian Zunja, and Huangquan Zunja in the VIP seats. Immediately, Qian Zunja laughed. Looks like Lei Zunja has really invested. You have even personally helped hide her actual strength. Are you planning on catching us by surprise? Lei Zunja laughed out loud when he heard this. He said, "What is Qian Zunja saying? This girl's status is a little unique. Therefore, I can only do it this way. There is really no other choice." Looks like Lei Zunja really wishes to continue holding the top seat of this season's for Pavilion Grand Meeting. The Wind Lightning Pavilion likely has the highest chance of victory in this competition. Feng Zunja's gaze paused on Feng Qing's lovely body as he softly spoke. Feng Zunja is thinking too much. That girl Qingluan is someone from the mythical bird tribe. If her bloodline awakens, she can also be considered an outstanding person among the younger generation. Lei Zunja waved his hand and laughed. However, his eyes revealed a pride that ordinary people had difficulty detecting. He indeed coveted the thought of gaining the top spot in this season's for Pavilion Grand Meeting. Feng Zunja merely smiled noncommittally in the face of Lei Zunja's words. Huangquan Zunja by the side frowned. Wang Chen could be considered one of his most outstanding disciples after all these years. However, there was still a little gap when he was compared to Feng Qing. It seemed that the position of the Yellow Spring Pavilion would not experience too much change during this season's Grand Meeting. The Yellow Spring Pavilion had always been ranked last among the 4 pavilions. However, Huangquan Zunja was helpless to improve this. After all, the Yellow Spring Pavilion was indeed unable to compare with the other 3 pavilions when it came to the method of grooming the younger generation. Xiao Yang's eyes were firmly locked onto Feng Qing while he sat on the silver wood. He had always felt a vague sense of danger when facing this woman. This had nothing to do with strength. It was just a vague feeling that was inexplicable. Xiao Yang knit his brows. His eyes slid as they slowly swept over the arena. At this moment, every corner of the arena had some competitors standing with cautious faces. These people were all quite young, but they were exceptionally strong. Of course, those who had the qualification to participate in this grand meeting were definitely not ordinary people. They were either those with outstanding training talent or people supported by a strong faction. This place is indeed worthy of being the Central Plains. Even in the Black Corner region, one would be hard-pressed to find a couple of young Do Huangs. It is unexpected that the 4-pavilion grand meeting has attracted so many of them. Xiao Yang softly sighed. The Central Plains were indeed worthy of being the part of the Do Chi continent with the most strong people. This place was filled with tons of talent. No one knew if there would suddenly be a complete dark horse appearing. Who? While Xiao Yang was feeling amazed, his shifting gaze suddenly paused. A surprised "her" escaped from his mouth. The spot where Xiao Yang's eyes had paused was coincidentally a corner of the arena. There was a black-clothed figure there. This person's back faced Xiao Yang. Despite being a great distance away, Xiao Yang felt that this back was somewhat familiar for some unknown reason. Xiao Yang slightly frowned. With his current strength, this kind of familiar feeling would not appear without reason. While Xiao Yang was feeling uncertain, the black-clothed man clenched his hand, and a long spear flashed and appeared. His body also coincidentally shifted, allowing Xiao Yang to see the outline of his face. Xiao Yang was stunned for a moment when he saw that familiar face from the side. Finally, he abruptly clapped his hands. A stunned expression flashed across his eyes. Lin Yang? What is that fellow doing here? The person who had appeared in front of Xiao Yang's eyes was surprisingly Lin Yang, who had accompanied Xiao Yang from the Jiannan Academy to the Jianma Empire back then. However, when Xiao Yang went to the valley to undertake a retreat, Lin Yang, Lin Xiao and Liu Qing left the Jianma Empire together. It was unexpected that Xiao Yang would actually be able to meet this fellow in this place. The surprise in Xiao Yang's eyes gradually withdrew and he involuntarily shook his head. He had just arrived in the Central Plains for less than half a year, but he had actually met quite a few familiar people from back then. Fate was really unpredictable. Since everyone has gathered, let the competition begin. Lei Zunja from the leader's seat ceased chatting when he saw that everyone had gathered in the arena. He raised his head and waved his hand. That faint voice of his resonated within everyone's ears. V.